Alton's story. I'm your host, Frederick Smith, author of and narrator for The Acquired Taste for Adventure, a D&D audiobook series based upon actual Dungeons & Dragons games. And with that, let's get started. Alton's story, The Acquired Taste for Adventure, Chapter 5, concluded. The group of adventurers inside Cragmaw Cave had nearly killed both Ripper and Bulk, the warg and the bugbear master that controlled her. Now that Bulk was begging the group to save his beloved pet, Alton came out from hiding behind a stalagmite to address the monster. "All right, you. I'm tired of smelling this goblin hole. I'm tired of eating rations, and I want to go home and sleep in a real bed. So if you want us to save her, you better tell us where Dornan is, and make it fast." The little halfling looked around at his fellows for support, all of whom nodded their agreement. Bulk seated his enormous frame on a crude wooden bench in the northwest corner of the long rectangular room. He leaned forward, with his left arm resting on his left leg, so that the appendage didn't put any weight on his shoulder, and also to prevent rubbing the raw flesh of his burned back against the rough stone behind him. His right arm dangled between his legs, with his elbow resting weakly on his right knee. "All of us down here, we're all just servants, you see. I was ordered by my master, Grawl, he's another bugbear, to capture the gnome and a map to some lost mine, and to keep him here until Grawl and his soldiers returned. We knew about when and where they'd be traveling, and what the gnome looked like and so forth, so we set up an ambush and we waited for them. We caught him out on the road, and we dragged him back here, alive. And it was nothing personal, mind you, it was only business. Some of my goblins wanted to torture them, but I told them no, of course. I just don't believe in that sort of thing." The bugbear offered a disarming smile, glancing over to see what was happening to his beloved Ripper. Jazzberry was already healing the warg, feigning assistance to try to coax more cooperation out of Bulk. She was in no hurry, though, firstly wanting the group to have leverage over the bugbear while they questioned him, and secondly because she had no real intention of trying to heal the evil beast anyway. If the bugbear decided to get tight-lipped, she would only need to tug on the embedded bolt a little bit, and the warg would whimper, sending the bugbear back into a cascade of explanations, justifications, and self-serving excuses. But deep down, she could feel the warg's whimpers were also awakening something inside her, and as much as she didn't want to admit it, some small part of her was enjoying the monster's suffering. And she didn't know how she knew it, but this dark spot within her seemed to be the same place where her strange powers came from. Alton noticed what his friend was doing out of the corner of his eye, and was forced to wonder about her unexpectedly cruel behavior. Bulk continued his tale. "Then the other bugbears returned. Grawl was in command, and he and his soldiers took your friend and the map off to the castle." Bulk enunciated the last word like it was important. Now, I don't know which castle or where it is, but one of his soldiers mentioned the castle, and Grawl shot him a look like he wanted to kill him, and the other bugbear shut his mouth and slinked away all cowardly-like. Then they took the gnome and the map, and they left, heading off to the east, probably toward the Tribor Trail if I had to guess. Bulk's upward inflection proved he wasn't too sure about the last detail. "That's as much as I remember, really." Bulk paused, awaiting another question from the group, and to again glance over at the whimpering pup under Jazzberry's care. Malik, the dwarf barbarian, was still badly hurt from his encounter with the monsters. He began retreating to the far eastern side of the room, from where they had entered, but not before tapping Erevan's shoulder and signaling for him to please administer to his wounds. The elf noble followed behind the dwarf, but Jazzberry, Idriana, and Alton remained near to Bulk on the west side of the room, forming a loose group around the bugbear while they listened to his story. This fact was not lost upon the crafty monster. He eyed the group of adventurers, which seemed to be letting down its guard, especially the little halfling that was boldly standing so close to him, exactly as he hoped for. Bulk counted the paces as the dwarf bruiser walked away, leaving his fellows behind and watching with amazement as he took the damned spellcaster with him, too. As the high elf and the bleeding dwarf continued toward the far eastern edge of the room, Bulk tried to hide his smile from the other three adventurers. He had killed many so-called heroes, and sometimes it required a little guile to go along with a lot of brutality. The bugbear would only need to continue his ruse of being the lowly victim for a few more moments, and then he would show them who the mighty bulk really was. He would rip apart this irritating pink devil, smash the frail dark elf, and then eat that smart-mouthed halfling alive. Bulk watched with glee as Malik finally sat down, collapsing to the floor against the cave wall so that Erevan could staunch his bleeding. Idriana had produced a map from her pack that Alton was pointing at, demanding to get Bulk to show them exactly where they'd taken Dornan. Bulk again insisted that he didn't know, that he'd never been to the castle and had only heard rumor of it. The evil monster turned to Idriana and again growled at her in Undercommon. "I've already told you as much as I know. You and the spider can both go to the 9th hell." Bulk, now feeling that the moment was right, suddenly grabbed a short sword that was hidden on the underside of the bench he sat on. He was instantly upon his clawed feet, roaring and lurching forward to make a backhanded swing at his closest target, the stupid little halfling that had dared to draw so near to the mighty Bulk. The slice, which caught Alton completely by surprise, only barely missed him, but the rogue stumbled backwards, falling over and into the fire pit behind him, burning himself as he scrambled away. The half-drow ranger, Idriana, jumped back from the monster with great agility, going into a graceful backslide on the floor as she pulled an arrow from her quiver. She observed that Bulk's chest was awkwardly exposed, as his right arm was still following through from the backhanded blow he'd tried to deliver to the halfling. So, she loosed an arrow at the monster and hit him through the meat of his upper right breast. Bulk grimaced in considerable pain, aware that his surprise attack was not going well. The monster continued forward, kicking at the fire in a desperate attempt to shower them all in flaming embers as a painful distraction. The pieces fell on the three of them in a rain of burning fragments, and Idriana and Alton both went to cursing their misfortune and trying to put out the burning particles that covered them. But not Jazzberry. The tiefling bard, despite receiving the worst of the kicked fire, didn't even flinch, as her demonic lineage had given her an innate resistance to the burning coals. She merely gave Bulk a wag of her index finger to shame him for his childish, dirty tricks. Using her best stage voice to project and enunciate, she aimed another cutting insult at the unscrupulous bugbear they fought, hopeful that the biting sting of her tongue might infuriate him into a blind rage. "All hail King Bulk, the villainous, the hairy, the snorting, rump-fed boar-pig!" Her words jabbed through Bulk's mind, as though they had been sharpened as fine as an adder's tooth. The monster was absolutely incensed now, and was literally seeing red, Jazzberry's lovely magenta flesh needing to be stripped from her bloody, broken bones. Erevan, the high elf swordsman and mage, had been in the middle of trying to stitch Malik's wounds, but he had to leave his work half done to assist in the battle. "Stay here, friend, unless we truly need you," he said, trying to deter the barbarian from standing, though Malik apparently didn't require much convincing. The overdressed elf turned on his heels and took a few steps westward. "You again?" he said with utter disdain. The high elf quickly went through a set of well-drilled motions and incantations that drew upon obscure energies from worlds unseen. His will created and then loosed another bolt of fire, striking the bloodied bugbear in the center of his chest. The searing barb buried itself deep into Bulk's heart, burning away the last of his treacherous vitality. The monster collapsed, dead, and the adventurers all sighed from relief and exhaustion. Alton, who was on the floor next to the fallen body of the monster, now saw the elf noble in a different light. While the elf was too bold for his own good, perhaps he was capable of taking care of himself. Pardon the interruption, but if you're enjoying my work, please like, subscribe, and leave me a comment down below. And don't forget to hit that bell icon to receive notifications whenever I upload a new video. That moment of calm reflection proved to be short-lived, though, as 3 more goblins stormed around the corner near the eastern entrance where Malik sat alone, helplessly. The first 2 of them were armed with short swords, and the third with a bow, but all 3 of them were intent on taking revenge for their fallen master. They immediately seized upon the dwarf like a pack of hungry dogs, trying to take advantage of his wounded state before he could defend himself. But Adriana's keen ears had heard their footsteps coming. The half-drow ranger turned and fired her longbow, and the arrow dropped the first of the goblins dead. But the second continued its chittering charge toward the hobbled dwarf. Courage was usually in short supply for goblins, but the urge to hurt the weak was always found to be in great abundance. As the second goblin swordsman continued his dash for blood, the third started drawing back its bow to return fire at the half-drow ranger. Malik saw the monster rushing him and feebly tried to stand, but he was barely off the floor and struggling to raise his weapon defensively when he was stabbed by the goblin's short sword. The foul monster, grinning with delight, yanked his sword from Malik's stout frame, producing blood that formed splattered abstractions at the barbarian's feet. The wounded dwarf dropped back to his knees and then fell over on his side, remaining still. The goblin archer in the rear of the pack loosed an arrow and struck Adriana in the shoulder of her bow arm, staggering her backward. Touching her wound, she then looked at her fingers and could see them reflecting a dark, glossy liquid in the orange firelight, and she realized this was the aubergine richness of her own blood. As it spread a wet warmth over her body, the half-drow ranger was overtaken by a frightening thought. My arm is too hurt. I can't use my bow. Alton, sensing another opportunity, scampered forward, sliding into the space behind her cloak. Adriana was hurt, but her unsteady body still made ample cover for the halfling rogue. His crossbow bolt suddenly appeared, as if by magic, from the obscured space below and behind her, sailing out and slicing across the room to hit the goblin archer in the upper thigh. The bolt was tipped with a broadhead point, a multifaceted arrowhead with 4 cutting blades, each as sharp as a razor, and each facing in a different cardinal direction. As it cut through the flesh of the goblin's unprotected inner thigh, it severed the main artery, setting the goblin's lifeblood spurting from the gash. Dropping its bow, it fruitlessly tried to use both hands to hold in the juices that came from the gaping wound. Bleeding at this rate, the abominable bowman would be dead within a few heartbeats. Malik, usually up front and enjoying the commotion of the fracas, was unconscious on the floor, a puddle of blood forming around him. If the group of adventurers didn't act fast, he would be sharing cups with his ancestors before too long, and they would be pouring cups to offer libation to the fallen dwarf. The final goblin, exhilarated by the thrill of combat, or the thrill of stabbing a helpless opponent anyway, lunged forward and struck at Adriana, thinking she would also make for an easy mark in her punch-drunk state. Perhaps he would kill this one too. Perhaps he would kill all of them. Perhaps he would be crowned king of the Warrens now that Bulk was dead. But Erevan saw the strike coming and parried it before it hit his friend. He intercepted the monster's attack and then interposed himself between the green menace and his wounded half-drow companion. Time for you to learn some manners, Erevan said to the vile thing. Not wanting to lose a friend on this particular day, Jazzberry simply ran past the goblin to help Malik. The evil creature was now too busy with Erevan and left her alone as she scampered past, instead keeping its attention fixed on the threat from the high elf swordsman. The tiefling songstress made it to Malik's body, and from her assessment, it looked as though the dwarf barbarian was moments from death. His face was stricken with a sickly green pallor, and he was bleeding fast from the stab wound to his chest. She went through his pack to find where the dwarf had put the potion of healing they'd found earlier, and she raised the bottle to his lips. Malik's eyes suddenly opened as he drank, and upon finishing the miraculous beverage, he screamed in pain while Jazzberry packed a wad of gauze into the wound on his side. "I'm glad to see you're still with us, Malik," she smiled, preparing the next handful of cotton for him. "Why didn't you drink this sooner?" she asked, referring to the potion that had just saved his life. Alton was ready for this battle to be over. No reward could be worth all this. He was still obscured behind Adriana, who had now dropped to a knee from her injuries, but he felt sure that the last goblin, who was distracted with Erevan, still didn't know where he was. Alton's bolt streaked out from behind the long-shanked form of the half-drow ranger, catching the goblin right in the chest. The monster's hand contorted into a misshapen claw as it dropped its short sword. The weapon clattered to the floor, and then the monster fell next to it, motionless. Erevan realized the combat was finally through. He was exhausted from the expenditure of his magics, and his sword seemed heavier than it ever had. The High Elf hastily made for Idriana, and he reached into his physician's pack to get some healing herbs for her. He administered to her wounds, while Alton nervously stood guard with his crossbow, ready to defend against any more attackers that beset them. Erevan's words came as cold comfort. She's all right for now, but she won't be using her bow for a while. At the same time, Jazzberry was still attending to Malik, using a combination of field medicine technique and improvisation, which was her true strength in life, to repair what ailed him. "Damn you, Devil Bard, that hurts!" he winced. He started to look somewhat better, although his curses and pained expressions belied the fact that Jazzberry was less concerned with bedside manner than she was with medical procedure. After a few more moments had passed, the rushing blood that echoed within their ears had diminished to the point where they could hear again, and it seemed as though the goblin warrens were quiet once more. They were alone, at least in this section of the caves. Erevan and Jazzberry assisted each other in the treatments of Idriana and Malik, and soon the two were splinted and bandaged, fixed and stabilized as well as they could be for now. And that is where we are going to leave it for today, but rest assured we will pick up from where our story left off in next week's episode. Thank you so much for staying until the end of the video, and if you enjoyed what you heard, please consider donating to my Patreon, which you can find linked in the description. I appreciate all of you, and until next time, please be kind to yourselves and to each other.